Now, welcome to Hidden.
Hi, world.
All right. Let's see. Doodle poll. Oh yeah, let me share this thing too.
I apologize in advance. My computer is sounding like jetting. I need to clean it.
I don't hear it, but
Nice.
Does that work? What's happening? Nothing.
Yeah, it looks like some of the Wednesday times are pretty close. Like Wednesday, 12 to.
Based on
That's
the
better.
it looks like possibly either Nico or Josh has a meeting that maybe one of them could reschedule one of those, and then that would.
It's plausible. Yeah, I can take a look.
That particular context is I'm really tired of having a meeting during the one time of the day I can have lunch. So I don't reschedule my lunch to dinner time.
That is.
Oops.
What happened to the? Whoa! What is?
I shared the wrong thing. That's what happened.
That's not.
Wait, now I'm like, my screen is still. I don't have access to my computer anymore. I only see all your faces. What?
Are you using?
There we go. Okay, I fixed it. It's fixed. So, well, Josh, can you have your lunch from 12 to 1, I wonder, in terms of like Wednesday, the times?
Can we like convert these times?
I suspect this would be a discussion better had asynchronously.
That's probably true. But I just mean that the most promising time on this schedule is like somehow there's these 2 Wednesday times that either Josh or Nico can't make.
Why don't you send out an email with those 2 times and we can cover it there.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. So
Thursday, I often have evening obligations that are then.
Yeah, I would find it hard to make that time personally. But
also worth pointing out, if you're talking about Wednesday 1 to 2, that is on top of the cargo meeting.
Oh, that's why. You can see how active I am as a part of it, that I didn't even notice that. I didn't even okay, we'll figure it out.
We're looking at we did a little pre-triage, and we went through the PI issues, and so this issue, I think we might want to push it to the main topic. Depends on what we want to cover in the main topic. I have a few thoughts, but it's basically a stability question that came up in the compiler with a kind of cleanup change that has some effect on existing code. And
this is the
stability more.
This is the tuple indexing with usize suffixes and things.
Yes. So we won't do it now because it seems unlikely we'll cover it. And my rule of thumb is with these triage things, if we can cover it in 5 minutes, great. I don't think we'll cover that in 5 minutes. So one of them here is 51497. This is kind of an interesting one. It has to do with some quirks of method resolution and whether, basically it comes down to if you import a trait by name and you also have a glob that pulls in a trait, it gets shadowed. If you just reference X by name, you always get the explicit import. But method resolution doesn't respect those precedences. And MatCloud was proposing that maybe we would want to change that, and there are some reasons we might. However, I think in particular this is an interesting one. So the shadowing rules enable us to add things to preludes and so on, but the method resolution makes that sometimes a breaking change. However, I think it would probably at least technically be a breaking change because it might be that that there is no. I don't know. Basically, my thought on this is if someone wants to see this happen, which I'm not opposed per se, but we would need to do some investigation, sort of looking into the rules, trying to think of corner cases and really lay out all this stuff. And that's what we should ask. Does anyone want to do this?
To be clear, this proposal isn't making new things breaking changes, right? This will only make more code work, right?
I think that's not clear to me.
That's not clear to me either. I get how it's saying that it will make future things possible without breaking that would today be breaking, but it's not clear.
Those things will still be breaking in edge cases, right? This is just making more things not breaking.
What I'm suggesting is it's not obvious that this change itself doesn't break things.
But it makes adding a trait to prelude in SCDM.
So This is only adding a resolution for ambiguities that exist today where we error, right?
I don't think that's entirely clear. Like, I think that's the idea, but we would have to. We would want to.
Maybe not to. Yeah.
Right. We would want to like dig into that a little bit, and also like sketch out what that would mean. Like, I think that you might be able to make that happen, but then it might lead to very surprising results in other cases. That's kind of why I want someone to investigate.
So I think a report and some creator runs would be nice here. So you have some information to base our decision.
Well, I mean, certainly if it's implemented correctly, a creator run should be clean, right? Because it shouldn't be resolving it. It shouldn't be doing anything to code that already compiles. It should only be changing the behavior of code that does not yet compile, right?
Sure, but let's check it. Like, let's make sure.
Yeah. I'm sorry. I'm just making sure we're on the same page and that I haven't misunderstood what the feature is.
I think you're right. That would be the goal.
The
question is, does anyone want to try to do that?
I would like bounce it back to MATLAB.
Saying like,
do you want to try it?
Propose implementation.
We'd be happy to create or run a PR adding this feature.
Right, that's what we do, right? We create a run and then we find out if.
I'm already working with MatCloud on some stuff with name resolution, so I'd be a semi-natural choice to try to at least assist.
Okay, I feel like the only caveat I want to add to that is that even if we get a clean run, I wouldn't that's a good data point, but I'd like to just consider it further after that.
Yes, that makes sense.
It's necessary but not sufficient for us to land.
Okay, we can do a creator run, but we would want to consider the sort of overall effect on method resolution. Yeah, that sounds good. Okay, I'm trying to remember what I had a corner case I was trying to write about, and then I closed my tab by accident. Maybe I can remember it later. All right, so next one. So this issue 47168 has to do with the hints we used to give. So if you get a type error like this program, you have a U size here and you expect a U32. I guess when they filed the issue, we would give all this help with like a bunch of random methods that you almost certainly did not want to call. But now we give no help at all. And there used to be some code that suggested that you do as U32. However, that is suboptimal because that will truncate and might very well not be what you actually wanted to do.
If only we
someone is echoing.
Yeah, so one point of information here is that we have stabilized try into. The downside of that is
I was about to say only we had a try from conversion trait.
Right. So try into.
I really think there should be. What would you just try into that unwrap would be a better choice than as U32?
You could maybe check if the context is like, does the method return a result, and in that case just try into question mark or something?
Well, we could certainly just suggest that they look into the try into trait or something, but they're not actually. No one actually asked us to give our input on the suggestion, but we are welcome to, I'm sure, to do so.
So we've already recommended the try into trait in the past. Like back in January, there was a discussion about that.
Right. So all what Esteban said is, what is the language's long-term view? And I think the answer is it's try into. Is this correct? We don't have any other plans that bear on this.
I don't think so.
No. I think that I think as is fine. I'm not as against as everyone else is, but I think that we're not doing anything else. So.
Okay.
Well, I mean, the third obvious answer would be the right answer is to change links to take U size.
Right. It's not clear. So presuming the other types are correct, try into is the preferred way to do a conversion. But
yeah.
So
yes.
Wait, but like, what is the? I was going to say to try into dot unwrap. That's what we're going to want to suggest. Just
no, try into and then handle the error.
I don't know that we should suggest a specific change. We might just suggest look into the try into trait and let the try into trait give more context. But
I think we can leave those details to the compiler team.
right.
I agree that like the answer to this question is we have no other plans, that we don't have anything else coming up.
Peripherally try a plan and those things might be relevant, but just only peripherally.
Yeah.
Hey, this is a stupid question, but does anyone know why the error type for try from U64 for usize on 64-bit platforms isn't bang? Is that just because they wanted the types to all match on?
Portability lint didn't happen, so we want it the same always.
Okay. Size.
All right. So for the nominated RFCs,
so someone's gonna say?
Yeah, actually that's a good idea. Who will write this? I'll write it right now.
I can write that.
Okay, Scott will write it. Awesome.
So who will write about the other one? Method resolution.
Is that the right Scott? I don't know.
Felix, since you are involved, maybe you can write something?
Yes.
For the MacLab thing? Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So nominated RFCs. So 2582. So this RFC. I don't know if
I would like to discuss the other one first.
Okay, we can do that.
2515.
2515.
Yeah. So, have you thought anything about this? Thoughts?
Yes. So I am actually, in general, this link is not working. Optimistic that I'm just going to remove my concern. Can you all mute when we're not speaking, because someone has an echo and it's really like I can't think well when I'm my own sentences a few seconds ago echoed back at me, that's all. So yeah, I actually have been, my actual position on this is that I've been coming around to it, and I want to mainly like think about the objection that I had before and write out why, like be able to justify why I don't think that anymore. And the main thing is an issue of focus and being able to focus on it. And I want to sometime in the next few weeks focus on it, because I feel much closer to the consensus that everyone else has on it. It feels like a good way to work on that experience prior to working, like dealing with the await syntax question. And so basically, I think that possibly the concern that I registered, I will remove without any further discussion with anyone else once I focus on it, which I was possibly going to do this week, but then didn't, and instead did the 408 thing. And so sometime the next, maybe next week, maybe the week after, I hope to essentially go through my thought process on it, and possibly I'll just write a post which removes my concern. So that's my status on this RFC.
That sounds really good. So I think that's that then.
I'm muted. Okay, yeah. So votes to ponder. We'll check back in 2 weeks. Otherwise,
sounds great.
That sounds wonderful. One quick note on the other item, the async await, without going into depth on it in this meeting at all. The only comment I was going to make was I saw the 408 post. I was really excited about the idea of that syntax. It sounds really interesting to me. And if you would be interested in having a sounding board or discussing the idea of ways that the pattern-like syntax could make sense with question mark in a way that doesn't have the right to left, left to right problem, I'd be interested in having that discussion in order to make sure that there are reasonable alternatives on the table.
Sounds good.
I left some of my thoughts on the internal thread.
Yeah, I need to reply to the internals thread. I'm going to try to do that tomorrow, because also there was Russ Johnson's post about.
You see my comment here. Does this sound fine? Live update. I'm clicking. Okay.
Cool.
So to come to this, back to this one, so 2582, I don't want to discuss at this moment because I think it will take us more than 5 minutes guaranteed, but I wanted to propose that we should schedule a time to talk about this in more depth and try to have Ralph here, for example. This is the operator around raw references. And at least I was surprised because it completely changed from the time when I looked at it to the next time that I looked at it, because I guess there was a lot of conversation in the meantime. I'm not sure that I disagree with the changes. I haven't really thought about it, but seemed like it might be useful for us to all get on the same page, or at least talk about it all together.
So this RFC might change slightly again. I would like to do a creator run and test whether we can like have ampersand raw and then X an expression without having conster or mute. That needs to be checked with creator first. And I need to discuss it with Eddie because apparently this is not possible for some reason.
Okay.
Remains to be seen.
Okay.
You're suggesting parser subtlety of effectively a contextual keyword raw next to ampersand and seeing if that would break?
Yeah, pretty much.
Oh, I didn't realize this was adding surface syntax. I definitely was thinking
that was the change that I was referring to, where I was like, what happened here?
It certainly will break if you do it that simply, right? But anyway, like it seems like
I'm not sure.
I don't know.
I think
I'm going to ask a stupid question now, and somebody can tell me, why is it and raw and not star raw?
Well, for one thing, because star is the dereference operator, not the take the address of operator.
So, I think that's not a stupid question. That was actually proposed by Gabor initially. I think this is exactly the kind of thing that would be good for us to talk about.
I would be fine with either, personally.
In particular, I don't think of ampersand as the address of operator in REST. So that might be an interesting thing to talk about.
Well, I think point star is definitely the dereference operator, not the create a pointer from this operator.
I have a meta
I
question.
agree with that.
Yeah, go ahead, Felix.
Does anyone else feel like it was sort of a mistake for this RFC to be rewritten this much? And
Yes.
be the same RFC? Like they should have opened.
Yes, I think it should have been closed and opened as a new RFC, because now
Yeah.
all the existing commentary is not correct.
Yeah, I feel like this would have been a good idea to simply close this RFC, or at least postpone this RFC in favor of a new RFC for surface syntax.
I mean, the commentary that exists makes sense to explain the change. I don't care.
Well,
That's why you can refer to other RFC pull.
Yeah.
requests.
Yeah.
so actually, this is interesting. I don't want to spend 100 years on it, but it is an interesting meta point that I think is pretty important, which is that, like, I think we should be moving more to summarizing and not requiring people to read all the comments to know, sort of accumulate the history of the issue. And maybe this would be a good case for, let's summarize what led up to it.
Yeah, there's
That also
given the
explains-
187 hidden comments, it would be very helpful.
Yeah.
And note that summaries get hidden as well. So like
By summary, I meant new RFC is opened.
Yeah.
It begins
Yeah,
with ICP.
right.
So
Yeah,
I don't
if
think
the
exactly.
RFC
I want the summary to be the prior art in RFC.
Yeah,
Wait,
if the
I
new
wanna
RFC has a
clarify.
summary of this, that would be helpful.
Yeah, having it in the text itself, I think, is really useful. To just be able to read the text from top to bottom and understand everything. That would be really nice.
Is the original RFC where this was not about surface syntax like in terms of like an MVP? Like, is that like something that is like a subset of adding the syntax, and possibly we could just like move forward with that and then make a new separate syntax RFC for the syntax, and that could be like something we discuss separately from the original like core proposal?
I think the original
Undefined,
one
like, the
still
core
had
semantics for us,
semantic
like.
impact.
I think we should talk about this in this scheduled meeting. We're only at 4 minutes from when we started, 5 o'clock. But this seems like a good.
Yeah.
I don't feel there's total consensus that we want syntax, for one thing.
Definitely.
I don't feel consensus
No.
on that. So I think it would be good for us to have a meeting to talk about the issue.
Yeah.
What are the pros and cons of those things, and go back over it. Unless everyone feels they all remember all the context. But
No.
I would like
I-
to have a review of this with an eye towards what were we trying to solve and why did it change to surface syntax.
Okay.
So I can answer that question now if you want.
I think it would be
I don't want.
Yeah.
discussion that leads
I think
on.
we should not answer that question now, or any other questions
I
about it.
think we're good. I'll talk to Ralph. We'll put it on the
Okay.
agenda for a future event. In fact, I will
I
copy
think
right now.
Works for me.
can we make progress on this now? The compiler team change to put this in Mir and stuff like that is probably going to happen, but also doesn't need RFCs.
Definitely needs RFC.
For Mir?
Regardless, well, it needs for the
But I mean,
semantic
you can
impact.
put it. If you can put it in Mir, but
You can put it in Mir and not expose it.
Sure, but that's just dead code in the compiler.
All right. Back to this. So, good. We're moving on. 5 minutes, 38 seconds. Done. Okay. There's a lot of unassigned RFCs. We didn't really get to those in our pre-triage. I don't know if any of these feel like things that people want to jump on.
I'll take discriminant bits.
Oh yes, that's a good one.
I'm quite skeptical about the discriminant bits RFC as it is right now.
I don't know what it is, but
So
I would be happy to talk about this one a little bit. Hang on one second. I need to actually get it open. It will open.
So I assign it to Felix, right?
yeah. Why don't we hold off on talking about it in too much? Well, I don't know. Do we want to? So what do we want to talk about? We're coming in on 30 minutes, which is why I'm trying to decide. Do we want to go into, I think we could, can we briefly discuss what we will discuss with the main meeting? I want to throw 3 things out.
Yeah, we have half an hour.
So before we discuss anything else, I would like to quickly go through the drop semantics for unused arguments in async await.
Okay, so that was one of
So
the.
One of the 3 things we're possibly going to talk about.
That today, I would object to the use of the term quickly because that will be the discussion for today if we start that discussion.
That's my sense. I have 3 things that are on my mind. One of them is discussing stability. I agree that will be I think that will, and by stability, what I mean is I've seen a couple of topics basically seem to be arising. First off, we had the NLL challenge, like coming to consensus around what to do with the NLL. But I think and then there's this other question mark, this question about the dot and tuples. And in general, my sense is that stability seems to be a rising source of conflict, and that it's been a while. Context has changed since 1.0, and it might be good for us to talk about whether we want to revise our stability policy, if we can all come to agreement on what exactly the policy is, the future compatibility warnings, part of this story, and so on. I don't expect us to come to agreement in this 30 minutes, but I would hope that we could better understand where we are and think about if and what next steps we might take. It's one thing. The other would be, I want to talk about the FCP process and how we could integrate it with meetings, and in particular, to talk about how we should handle blocking reservations, which also I think have been a source of a lot of conflict lately. And finally, there was the possibility of discussing the async await status update and this issue of drop parameters, which I think we could discuss, or we could also put.
So I would suggest 2 things. We discuss async await, drop, and then we discuss the FCP process in that order.
What is your motivation for having that order?
Because I want to get through the unused stuff, because it's something that we need to get done soon.
So I feel like that one is not going to become a critical issue until it's the last thing blocking that. And considering we still have to sort out the syntax, I don't think it will be that big a deal if that one waits a bit. I would personally vote for us getting
So, right?
FC
Like,
process proposal and then the async await bits.
What was that, Boats?
Sure.
just that the drop thing, if we decide to change it, I think that it is not an easy implementation change. And so deciding that sooner than later might be beneficial.
That's fair.
I think one of the complications was implementation. There actually was a lot of discussion on this today that I didn't pick up on yet.
Let's discuss what we are going to discuss so much
Yeah.
that we don't actually get to discuss it.
I think I generally agree with Josh's take that I don't feel as much priority on this as other people seem to, in part because of it's not the last blocking issue, and in part because I don't know why the other part is. I guess it seems okay if we talked about it next week.
Sorry, Nico, when you say it's not the last blocking issue, what do you consider to be the last blocking issue? Syntax?
I consider syntax to be blocking. I consider the region inference stuff to be blocking.
Which region inference stuff? Are you talking about the multiple lifetimes thing?
I am. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Well, my personal opinion is that everything that isn't diagnostics related seems blocking, at least maybe not generator specific, but everything else.
Nico, I'm still waiting around on you to do some research for the lifetime resolution thing, right?
Maybe. Let's talk about that offline. I think I posted some notes. I could do more. I'll do some more tomorrow.
I wasn't sure. I wasn't sure last time we talked. It sounded like you were gonna do more investigation, but
all right.
It wasn't clear.
So the one thing I would say, I'm happy we should stop talking about what we're going to talk about and just talk about it. But the thing I was going to say is that I think the FCP process might be shorter. But I guess that's probably we can only talk about one thing. So
yeah,
that's the reality.
We got echoing problems again.
Oh, well, I heard the echo. I also heard what sounded like a scream in the background.
Yes.
That was an ad on my phone. That was my bad.
Okay, no problem.
Should we just go to the drop stuff?
Show of hands.
Something.
Who wants drop?
Whatever we start talking about, no one's gonna stop the meeting till next. So let's just talk about whatever.
All right.
So I think that I'm very much inclined to feature gate it at the moment. That's my personal view, that it allows us to take your time.
So, all right, everyone knows the context here or not?
I've got the context on it. We discussed it in a previous meeting.
Okay.
What did you say, Taylor? I didn't hear anything. But
I just said, yes, we're familiar with the context. We discussed this in the last meeting.
Just making sure. So, my opinion is that I find it pretty hard to imagine that the right thing to do is to keep the current drop order. I would certainly be more amenable to feature gating than stabilizing the drop order. I think is than the
Sorry, there were a lot of negatives in that sentence. Were you saying you don't believe the right thing to do is to keep the current drop order?
I think what I'm saying is I think we should change the drop order. However, I might be amenable to feature gating if, I would rather, basically I might be willing to weaken to feature gate for the time being.
I'm really curious what the motivation is for changing the drop order, given that we have never had a semantic-specific definition for the drop order of async functions. What would be wrong with keeping the current drop order?
My argument would be that I think that if you went through and took a bunch of code and changed it to put async on all the functions, and then wait.
Is that a real thing that we anticipate people doing, like going around an existing code base that isn't async and then asyncifying a bunch of functions?
I mean, I do.
Yeah, somewhat, but I wouldn't expect them to care about drop order when they do.
I'll give you an example where I have A, wanted to do this, and B, I would care about drop order, which is that Salsa currently, which is the compiler incremental compilation library, is currently written in a threaded way, but I was considering porting it to use async FN. Salsa has locks that it holds, which are not data. They don't actually protect data. They're like logical locks, and they would get dropped possibly at the wrong time if I were to go through and make a transformation.
That makes sense.
I think that I found all the arguments in favor of changing it very compelling. And every time someone puts an argument in favor, I'm like, yeah, that's a good point, and I feel like we should change it more than I did before.
I have a very quick question about this business of feature gating, if you don't mind me interrupting. So if I understand correctly, if we feature gate the drop order as it exists, then the only way to bypass the feature gate is to actually make sure you used all your arguments. Is that correct? And thus, you would always get the worst case scenario of whatever the space overhead that Taylor is concerned about. That's motivating trying to commit to this current drop order.
Current behavior would be to not ignore arguments. That would be that you can ignore arguments that have a drop.
And in that case, if it's a problem performance-wise, people will tell us, hopefully.
Well, you can always use an async block instead of an async fun, right? If you want to not have the space overhead.
Well,
yeah, if you want to explicitly opt into this, it's sort of opting into a more efficient thing. But yeah, that's fine. You could even conceivably imagine having like a clippy lint or something that you enable everywhere that says, tells you to drop everything early before a yield too, so it doesn't wind up in the generator state, or could tell you to make something into an async block. We can make tooling around this if we want.
Would feature gating only apply to things that have drop glue? Like if something doesn't have drop glue, would you still be allowed to not use it?
I think we don't consider adding drop a breaking change. So we would have to.
Well, it is
a breaking change on question.
Can I ask the question of, is it just me, or is anybody else staring at mutex of unit and thinking the compiler is doing the correct thing, optimizing it out of existence?
That's not true.
No, I use mutex of unit all the time, and I use it for meaningful things.
That is definitely a side effect.
It's what you'd get if you asked for a lock in another language, right?
Yes, exactly. It's just a lock in that case.
So you're passing it into a function and then counting on the fact that it doesn't get dropped until the end of that function?
Yeah.
Yes.
Or rather, until the start of that function?
No, until the end of that. Sometimes.
Until the variable goes out of scope.
Until the feature starts running, yeah.
Well, hang on. I thought the current drop order of a non-async function is that an unused argument may be dropped at the beginning of the function.
No, that's not correct. Only if you use an underscore pattern.
And even then,
I don't think it gets dropped.
It doesn't matter. It still will survive to the end of the function for a function parameter.
Interesting.
Is that the behavior for underscore?
You drop it.
Is different.
Yeah. I think Josh's point was that if you drop it explicitly in the first statement of the function, then it would drop then.
That's correct.
That's also true.
Yeah,
but we had a meeting about this many months ago because there was some discussion of what the drop order should be for underscores there.
I remember we had discussing
like a future. You understand nothing has happened yet. What is the idea that nothing happens until the feature starts getting awaited or spawned or something, and so it's different from it being dropped before the feature is even constructed, which is the problem here. Is that it's like this for async functions is this would be like an earlier phase than even the beginning of the function, because if you drop something explicitly at the beginning of the function, that won't run until an async function. That won't run until you start running the async function, the feature.
I do remember we had a discussion about this quite some time ago for non-async functions, and I think the conclusion we came to there was there is some code that counts on drop order, and we can't change that. But I think that still leaves us with the question of how much do we need async fn drop order to match fn drop order, and how much can we say this is a new feature and we can define the drop order as we see fit, as long as it isn't too surprising. And what does not too surprising mean?
Yeah, I mean, that's the point. Is that I find the arguments compelling that it would be surprising, that it would be inconsistent, that it would the thing that the simplest people understand is for them to work the same way. And I also think where the argument in favor of changing it is sort of this argument from there being a lot of small things, these death by 1,000 cuts, that most of the other cuts we can deal with. And this is like the one cut that like has semantic implications. And so with death by 1,000 cuts, then you can handle one of the 1,000 cuts. So we can like take the overhead of, like by default, things stay around until like the function.
Yeah, and someone actually did bring up the related thing on the issue, which is that the other thing we don't do, but we could if we wanted to fix one of these other sort of death by 1,000 cuts issues, is dropping arguments prior to yields, right? Or dropping values that prior to yield.
I thought that compelling is like a comparison that like.
I'm sorry.
Bad idea. I found that a very compelling comparison. Like it seems like a bad idea to do that. Like to change the code to do that. Like it would be like.
So the difference to me between those, and I feel like this is sort of a little bit silly of me to be making this distinction, since like I think I'm on your side that we should just go ahead and change the behavior. But I think that the difference to me for those is that one is a lot more common and a lot more observable, and whereas the other impacts a lot more code and breaks a lot more users' expectations. But it's also the other comment I had to make about it is that one of those you can easily sort of, or you should be able to easily sidestep by calling drop early, whereas the other one of them you cannot, because you have to actually refactor it out in an async FN or an async block. It just so happens that drop doesn't actually work right now because of how the generator optimizations work and where we tag storage TED, but that's a mess. So I don't know what to say about that.
Well, I mean, and it's worth noting, though, I think that specifically what you're saying you can't do easily is not have it ever be part of the future state, but you can like drop it as the first thing you do in that function, right? And so that will, even from being part of the later await states, like only the initial state will have to happen.
Yes, that's correct.
So it won't be so like you can't keep it from growing the future states where there might be more state and they might be larger than that's my point. It's just that.
That doesn't actually. There are a variety of reasons why that doesn't actually work, especially for copy types. But like those are weird details that are probably not worth going into.
Sure.
It is possible that we can make that actually work at some point in time. Yeah.
Right. Copy types you never use, we like could optimize them completely out of the state, like because we know that their drop is pure because they have no drop.
Yeah. If they're unused copy arguments, we could theoretically like throw them away.
Yeah.
That's the one detail actually like ties into what I was bringing up before. The thing I worry about with the feature compatibility, the feature gating, is that it would lead to a pattern, I think, of people artificially using their own arguments in order to avoid the feature gate, including things that are copy, and thus they would artificially not be.
I would assume we would not lint on unused copy arguments, but that's a detail.
I mean, to be clear, when we say feature gate, like we wouldn't expect this to be terribly long-lived. I hope. Right? I think it should be one of the. I don't think we could consider this MVP of features done while this feature gate. Right?
So I would like to make a proposal for what we do here, and people can say if they disagree with it. I think that we should go ahead and do whatever we can to try and change the drop order to be the thing that would match the behavior of other functions. And as part of that, if it comes time to stabilize async await and we have all the other blockers covered, we should introduce a feature gate error on only drop implementing argument patterns that are unused. Does that sound right to people?
Well, things with drop glue and like they could possibly not actually drop and have a field that does, right?
Yes, things with drop glue. You're right.
What about? I mean,
if you're
I think the technically right thing is things that aren't copied, things that don't want copied.
Yeah, we can make it copy if you want. I think that's slightly less expansive, but
I think the distinction is not very significant. But it's just about like.
Yes, I agree. I don't care either way.
Yeah.
If you are confident about that implementation of the feature gating, then sure.
So it's the idea, Taylor, is basically we won't block on this, but we'll make a best effort to alter it.
Correct.
And
That's
then also
that's
that I think the proposal is also that we make the design decision, and we're not blocking on the implementation, not the consensus.
Yes.
correct.
I'm in favor of this.
I'm proposing that we decide this now, that we want to match other functions, and that if we don't ship with that behavior initially, it's only because we ran out of time to implement.
That's exactly what I wanted to do.
I will point out that I think the NLL project made a similar choice.
No. But we didn't feature gate.
Okay, I guess that's
why I proposed feature gate.
That seems all right.
Lesson learned.
That seems good.
One random thought. This means that we can't say async fun is a desugar to an async block and impl future, right? Because
We can. The desugaring is just slightly more complicated.
I think
Okay.
the desugaring, if we take this decision, the desugaring would be the let. Well, maybe not. Depends modulo.
Yeah,
the random
it's some more complicated series of re-let bindings inside of the async block.
Okay, yes. We reshadow all of the function arguments into the async block, and then it does the same
Something
thing.
like that. Yeah.
That's
okay.
just like something that we.
That's a good
will
answer.
totally-
Thank you.
In explaining to users, we're not going to talk about that, right? Like,
Right. Yeah.
for loop is actually quite complicated. We kind of like.
There is one thing I need to double check with Nico about inference and future compatibility, but yes, this sounds good.
Okay. So do we feel we need to do any, is this sufficient? We'll just copy this onto the thread. We don't need to do an FCP or anything like that.
Aaron is not here, and Eddie will probably just check your box and whatever.
Aaron will not have an opinion on this. Yeah.
Yes. So
Should we have an FCP for process reasons, but an FCP doesn't block feature gating it or implementing it?
I don't feel
think we need
it's warranted. Like, we don't make FCPs for every decision.
So
Just
It
come
feels like the sort of thing, especially since we have an FCP async await syntax stabilization itself. I think it would fall under that FCP,
Yeah,
right?
okay.
Yeah, sounds good. I think we should not have a sense that we need to have an FCP for every decision we make. So I think that'd be
Good.
Taylor,
Actually,
I'm assigning
yeah,
to you to write it down.
My
That sounds great. I can
interpretation
do
of the RFC had been that it's supposed to be this way anyway, so.
I mean, what you could do is just FCP, and then everyone checks their box here.
That doesn't work.
I really don't think an FCP is needed. Personally.
I think it's generally a good idea to move away from the idea that we need to have an FCP for every decision. I think that's virtuous that we're not going to do it.
All right. Do we want to? It's 3:48. That was pretty productive. Now the question is, we have 12 minutes. Do we talk about any FCP process proposal? I think stability is too big. Or do we end early and go home to our, well, probably not home for those who are on the West Coast, go back to our jobs?
So for the
I actually
FCP
do
process,
get home because my office caught on fire, and apparently we're all being sent home because the network's about to go out.
Okay, I take it.
I love how you described that the priority was, but we have to go home because the network went out.
Yeah.
I'm already home, so.
Just to get a rough straw poll of consensus, looking over this proposal, does anybody see a problem with this proposal? I'm not suggesting we discuss it in depth. I'm more asking, can we get a show of hands for this sounds good?
One sec.
I already told Nico that I thought it was great, so.
Yeah, I like it.
Yep.
Great. Discussion done. No.
That's fine. I mean, so yeah, basically we'll try to bring FCPs and
Effectively,
Right,
FCP is an automatic nominate.
yes, I think we should nominate.
That sounds good. The one thing I will say is that people in the team are varyingly good at just looking at FCPs on rc.rs, and usually there are some like non-controversial things that just hang forever because no one reviewed them, and we shouldn't like cancel FCPs because of that, because people didn't have time to check them. People should just like maybe every once a week or something, have a look at their RFC .rs and check their boxes if there's.
So one of the issues that I have is that like I don't know, I feel like I'm pretty good about this. I'm looking at my list again now, but like there are quite a few things on here that are just like things that I have intentionally not checked, and I wonder if there's maybe some way that we could mark those as being exceptional so that it's clear when there are new things that we should pay attention to.
You should leave concerns. That's what they're for.
Right, but I have left concerns, and it doesn't notate that on rfcbot.rs, right?
Oh.
I'm saying like I want to see a list of like all the things that I have neither listed a concern on nor have checked a box on. And in particular, there's a bunch of places where, and even in that list, it's a little ambiguous because there are places where I haven't left a concern, but my concern is just, yes, what they said, right? And someone else has left a concern.
Yes.
Plus one.
So I would.
So that seems
sounds like a feature request.
Yes.
But so basically, allow a way to exclude. I think if your concern is their concern, you should check your box. But yeah, but I think what I was kind of hoping to get away from a little bit was some of the asynchrony in our current process, because I think it doesn't always work that well. So like part of my goal here was that when we have an SCP, we would nominate the issue, and when we talk about it, ideally someone would discuss, because I think a lot of times that's also be helpful. What is the RFC? What's it about? And hopefully at the end of the meeting, we can all go check our boxes or register, or if we have concerns, like we'll know. So we won't have this problem that it's around for weeks.
I think that is a great suggestion in general, but I don't think it always works, and you need to allow for exceptions, like with the target feature stuff. I need to think about that for some time.
And I think we should set a time frame, or we should take away the FCP. Like, I don't know. That's my opinion, but
I also think there are some FCPs that just like aren't actually like. I can't think of an example, but sometimes it's just like not controversial and like just didn't need to be an FCP.
At minimum, we should set a time frame to check back in.
But how do we like decide what is controversial or not? It's hard to know that before. I mean, if you don't notify everyone, how do you know it's controversial or not?
I mean, I think proposing the FCP is fine. Are you referring to what both said, or what, or something else?
Yeah,
I think so. Yeah, I think I agree. It's hard to tell.
Yeah,
but I think I don't know. I don't know how to.
It's a very hard problem to solve.
Know when you see it. You know, like some problems. I'm thinking of like some of the.
So I post it up online. Somebody will be like, "Oh look, one of the line team members in charge, like the person in charge of async await, which would be very like not great."
I think Taylor, your fire is getting to the room. Fun for your life. Well, anyway, I agree with you that Central, I'm sure it won't work quite how I projected it. But at minimum, I think we should try to bring it to the meeting. And
I think it's a good guideline.
Yeah, it's about setting norms and knowing there will be exceptions.
Yes, that makes a lot of sense.
We'll work it out. All right, very good. Thanks, everyone.
Well, we have.
Yeah.
Nico.
Yes, sir.
Good night, Logan.
Hold on.